minor fall, the major lift, the barefoot king composing hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Thankful that to be a part of a church that is so generous. It's great that we could reach out to our friends in Ethiopia. They are beautiful people, and those kids have a future ahead of them now. So thank you again for your kindness and your generosity. It's fun to be a part of a church like this, isn't it? Where God uses us in great ways, not only around the world, but here. So yeah, we can applaud that. That's good. Appreciate your generosity. We're continuing through our series of 1st and 2nd Samuel. We've taken a look at David, and we want to see how God is there for him in all the circumstances of his life. Today we're going to talk about this being a place of desperation. When you think of desperation, you think of all different kinds of pictures, and I was talking to Jean, I said, I just like to have a good picture of desperation, and what comes to your mind? And she said, I think of Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. Now, you guys don't know who he is, but he was this real important TV show back in the day. And you think of this coyote was chasing down a roadrunner for dinner, so who would be the one in desperation? You think the roadrunner because his life was at stake, but in truth it was the coyote because the roadrunner never had a thing to worry about ever. Because the coyote messed it all up. We see this coyote had an incredible credit card because he was buying stuff on Amazon all the time. It was all coming in from Acme over and over and over. He had this huge enemy called gravity that always only affected the coyote and never the roadrunner. But he was desperate, I don't know if it was for food or his pride, but he kept going and going and going. Now that's a humorous look at desperation, but certainly there's other times when desperation comes on us. And all of us can relate to that time when you're driving down the road or you need to get somewhere and you got to go to the bathroom really bad, and that's a desperation, isn't it? There's the desperation when you're coming into church late and all the back rows are full and you can't find a place to sit. There's the desperation when it's time for lunch and you don't want to sit at that table by yourself, whether it's school or work. The desperation when the relationship you desire so bad isn't there, or it's falling apart, or the desperation you have when the bills keep coming in and the finances aren't there, or you lost the job, and it's a heavy, heavy weight of desperation that you carry. The desperation when your boss comes in and infers that unless the numbers come up, you're going to lose your job. You know those desperation feelings? It's a heaviness that comes over you and you wonder, where am I going to be? How am I going to survive through this? And that's the desperation we'll talk about, that heaviness that's there. One definition of desperation is a state of despair, typically one that results in rash or extreme behavior. And the second part of that is hard. That place of complete despair. And it's sad that here we are in this disparity of what's going on, and that sometimes we find ourselves in that darkness leading to the next steps, which are that rash behavior where it takes people to places they would never thought they would go. It's being at that point where you have this feeling of, if I could only get this, I will. We fill in the blank. Where you find yourself compromising, you do anything to get this response. When we're in those situations, there's a natural response that we do. We just kind of fall into this place of blaming. Either we would blame ourselves, look what I did, but usually we don't blame ourselves, we blame others. It's the person sitting next to me's fault. You been there? It's this person's fault. It's my boss's fault. It's those other people's fault. It's my enemy's fault. It's the competition's fault. It's my family's fault. It's my boss's fault. It's God's fault. We blame God as well. It's his fault that I'm in this situation. Where's God in all this? And we find ourselves in the bad place. It's a place where you just you feel that darkness all around you. It's just a heaviness. People talk about the heaviness of darkness, and it is there at that time. Let's take a look with David. You know, 2 weeks ago, we looked at chapter 16 when he was anointed king, this teenager, this young person called by God. He accepts that call, he stays faithful, and he also stays very humble. Chapter 17, Nakoma shared last week, didn't he do a great job with his message? Strong message. And we see David, this young guy, in his courageous faith, stepping forth to face his giant, and he does it in a great way, he does it with courage. The next chapter, we see him, now he's come along, he's being faithful. He's actually been placed as leaders of one of the leaders of the army of Saul. He's leading faithfully, he's done nothing wrong. He's been faithful to the call, he's been courageous, he's honoring those around him, he's doing the right thing, but in the midst of all that, when everything should be going well, everything starts caving in around him. And he didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes when desperation hits us, we think, whoa, where did this come from? Because I didn't do anything wrong, and David didn't at this point. But it certainly came down on him. We see David going out, he's leading the army, he's doing well. He comes back from one of his battles, he's victorious, and he has a fan club now started. In his fan club, the ladies come out, they start dancing in the streets, walking him back, and they start singing this song. He says, King Saul's killed his thousands, but David has killed his tens of thousands, and they're celebrating and lifting them up. Now, Saul, if he was wise, would have said, well, he is a great warrior, and he's my warrior, and he should have celebrated in that, but he didn't. Look at the response, chapter 18, verse 8. Saul was very angry. This refrain galled him. They have credited David with tens of thousands, he thought, but me only thousands. What more can he get but the kingdom? When it says he was very angry, the word can be used in different ways of saying he was so angry. It says exceedingly angry. The anger was so strong. It says he's furious, disgusted, galled. He was so angry about this when he should have been saying, isn't it great? He's doing well. The next verse, verse 9, and from that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David. Instead of celebrating with him, he became very jealous, very obsessed with it, and he was scared. But in his scare, he turned angry. In this anger, we see him a few verses later. David is sitting around playing an instrument after one of his battles, and Saul walks in and just begins fuming with anger, takes a sword and throws at him and tries to kill him, just sitting there doing nothing. We see Saul doing that a second time, this fuming anger coming out. We see in chapter 19, the first verse, where Saul actually commands his son and the rest of his army to go and find David and to kill him. And so David flees that area. And some of you relate to that. You've been doing the right thing. You're working hard at school. You're working hard on your sports team. You're working hard at work and your family. You're trying to do the right things. And all of a sudden, because of circumstances, maybe because you're doing well and they're not, everybody turns against you and they're coming down on you. And you think, what do I do? Sometimes it's because we've led the wrong way and we've done well, or we haven't done well ourselves. This anger comes on. And sometimes when that oppression comes over you and you're thinking, what do? We just trust ourselves. We go, I can fix this. I can get out of this. Now, guys, we would step into there, but ladies, you do the same thing. I can handle this. I can do this. I can make this right. Just watch. I will find my way out of this. We'll make it work. And we go along a couple chapters later, in chapter 22, we see David. He's hiding in a cave. The first of two caves that he goes and hides in. He's in Gath, and the Philistines are coming after him. Now, the Philistines, it makes sense they're coming after him because they truly are enemies. And some of the people that we face are hard. But it's sad, it's not just the Philistines, it's his own people. It's his own family that are turned against him in the sense because Saul at this point is his father-in-law. He's married Saul's daughter. You think we should be kindred spirits here working together, but it isn't. It turns the other way. When David is in this cave of darkness, he processes and works through what's going on. And sometimes when we're in that cave of darkness, we can get disoriented. We're thinking clearly, then the oppression comes on, desperation comes on, and we find ourselves thinking things that we would have never thought before, trying to figure it out. When money is a huge problem, we have our plans, it's worked out, and all of a sudden these bills, and you're overwhelmed, and you've lost a job, you don't know what to do, and you start thinking, what shortcuts can I make? Maybe you think I can work harder, I can do this, but how can I cut this short? And maybe how can I do this? And you're thinking, you compromise to cheat on your taxes because I need it worse than my government does. And you start thinking, how can I pilfer and steal a little bit from my employer because he should be paying me more? You start stealing from your family or your friends close by, and you find yourself in this really dark place. Think, how could anybody ever go rob a bank? It's because they've allowed themselves in this darkness to get disoriented, and they go themselves that direction. Desperation brings extreme steps for us. We need that relationship so bad. You just crave what you see others have, or you crave that touch, and so you find yourself compromising and building friendships and relationships that you know really aren't healthy or the right way to go. And you start stepping out of your boundaries that you know you should have had, and the boyfriend, the girlfriend, the affair comes along, and those relationships, and you think, how did I end up in this place? Because of desperation. That desperation of getting a vengeance back. You think, I need to avenge what happened, either for myself or someone that I love. And pretty soon, instead of trying to make things straight, we start twisting and turning, and we find ourselves conniving and truly seeking revenge, and find ourselves compromising standards that we never thought we would before, to the point that we would sabotage somebody else. And at those points, we don't look like a follower of Jesus by any means. Now, this doesn't affect anybody in this room, does it? Sure it does. We're all at those places, or we've been there, or we're going to be. We find ourselves in those situations, and I'm amazed as I've gone through life, I realize each one of us in the right situation are very capable of stupid, aren't we? And we think, how did we get here? And realize when those things come on us, and again, David did nothing wrong. He was doing the right things, but the oppressions come on, it's there, and how does he respond? And so I want us to look today at chapter 24 specifically. We're going to look through one of these situations. Saul's coming after David, and how David responds in desperation, and where is God in this picture? So we see him in chapter 24. He's in the Judean wilderness. He goes to a place it calls the desert of En-Gedi, or the valley of En-Gedi, and that's where he's at. And I haven't showed you pictures for a while. I like knowing where something happened, gives you a better picture. So I want you to look at this. This is En-Gedi. If you go to Israel today, you'll see this, and you'll see this beautiful shoreline, this gorgeous lake down at the front of us. This is actually called the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea, if you know much about it, it's 2,400 feet below sea level. It's the lowest place on earth. And this huge lake is 32% minerals and salt. And it's 9 times saltier than the ocean. So is this very good drinkable water? Absolutely not. Can you imagine? This is the Judean wilderness, spending days in this wilderness, finally seeing this water, and you think, finally it's there, and you just touch it, and you realize, I can't drink this at all. But so this wilderness stretched out, and this is where David was. And it's not, we think of a desert like a Sinai desert, all the sand. There's no sand dunes, but it's a desert. It's a desolate place. Nothing grows there. And when you come through this whole desert area, you can't drink the water. There happens to be a row of trees around here, and there's a valley. It's called the Valley of En-Gedi. And if you go in that En-Gedi, it's a nature reserve now. You walk up, and these beautiful trails, you see waterfalls. And these waterfalls are just flowing, and they're beautiful. You hike along some, you keep going up, and there's waterfall after waterfall after waterfall. And you can imagine David and his men traveling, being chased by Saul, finally getting this place and feeling so refreshed. And they're finally here, and of course, that's where Saul is going to go also, because he thinks this is where David may be. So they're at this place, they're hanging out. There's also plenty of game there. There's plenty of wildlife. These are called Geddes, the deer. They're Geddes, so the valley of En-Gedi is the valley of these deers. They're all around, and it's a great place to be. It's beautiful, it's refreshing. And so while we're looking at deers, I thought I'd show you a picture of another sweet little deer. It's my youngest grandchild. Isn't she beautiful? Yeah. I knew you'd want to see that. So anyway, back to En-Gedi. If you're there in En-Gedi, all the deers are there, all the game wildlife, but there also happens to be caves all over this place. As you're walking this valley, there's caves just scattered all around. And it's very easy. You look at the Bible and go, oh yeah, this is where it happened. You can see it all. You see where David and his men came, and they hear that Saul's army is coming. So what do? They start scattering around. They're hiding in all these caves. There's plenty of them. And they're back in these caves when Saul arrives. So Saul comes in here, and the Bible's pretty honest. It just lays everything out just like it is. It says that King Saul gets there, and he needs to relieve himself, the Bible says. And so there's no rest areas around. There's no quick trip close by. He can't go in front of everybody, so he goes into one of the caves. And just so happens the cave that King Saul goes into to do his business, that's the very same cave that Dave and a couple of his men are way back inside this cave. So he goes in, he does it, and then David sneaks up behind of him with his knife. So get this picture. Well, not the picture of Saul doing his business. Get the picture of David coming up behind him, all right? Look at verse number 4. It says, then David crept up unnoticed and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. That's all it says about that. Here's David coming up with a knife behind his ultimate enemy who's trying to destroy him. And I wonder if in that darkness, it doesn't say if he was thinking something else he could do. Because it says his men encouraged him to kill Saul, get this over with. And we find ourselves in a situation sometimes in your dark cave when you go, oh, I could just do this. No one will know it. No one will ever find out. It's dark, it's there, and we're tempted to compromise our standards that we would normally do. And I wonder if he didn't have one of those moments right there, and that's those dark times when we find ourselves doing the things that we never thought we'd ever do. But look at verse 5. It says, afterward, David was conscience-stricken for having cut off the corner of his robe. He felt really guilty about it. Now, it seems like it's a very simple thing to do, except I wonder if he felt guilty because of other things that he thought he would do or there. But even at that, he was doing something that's going to humiliate this king. But he was guilty. He felt guilty for whatever it was that was going on in his heart and his mind. And we read further, it says that Saul left, went down below, and then David comes out of the cave. It says he bows down before him to show respect to this man who was trying to kill him. And I don't know if he was 10 feet away or by this time Saul's way down in the valley below him, but he comes out and we see this, verse 10. David speaking to him says, some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not lift my hand against my master because he is the Lord's anointed. And so David says, I could have killed you, but I didn't, because even when this man has turned evil and doing everything against David, David still sees that Saul is a man that God created and God put in place, and he needs to respect and honor him. Sometimes when you are just in desperation and someone is doing so much evil against you, do you stop and see them still as someone that God created? It's hard to do that. But David was able to keep that perspective. Verse 11, see my father, look at this piece of your robe in my hand. That father is a term of respect, but also because he's his father-in-law. He says, I cut off the corner of your robe, but did not kill you. Now understand and recognize that I am not guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life. He said, I could have done this, but I didn't. Verse 12, may the Lord judge between you and me, and may the Lord avenge the wrongs you have done to me, but my hand will not touch you. He's saying, I could have avenged you. I could have kept back. I could have gotten back at you. I could have done these things, but he says, I trust God to bring the vengeance that needs to be done. He could have taken matters in his hand. He could have fixed it, but he said, I am going to follow you. The fact that he says, I'm still going to trust God. When we were talking about this week, Gustavo, our campus pastor out at Troy, he said, this shows David's moral compass never got off track. He knew what was right. He knew how to serve God. Even in times where it was wrong, he stayed focused. Now, sad to see in weeks ahead, we're going to see that David lost that moral compass at times. But this place, he was able to keep it. We have that choice. When we come into those situations, we can either trust ourselves or we can trust God. Because when I trust myself, it's not always the right determination, especially when I'm disoriented in the darkness of desperation. I can determine this is what I think is best. This is how I fix this situation. I can step in and I can climb out and I can do this, and our pride steps in, or we can say, God, this is all you, and I'm going to follow you no matter what. David, in his complete desperation of his life at stake, being chased down, he's running for his life. He's hiding in darkness, never lost what God's called him to do. He kept the focus where it needs to be. And see, when we're completely out of options, we have that choice. When there's nothing else, am I going to trust God in this? Or am I going to try to find some way on my own away from God, another direction? When we're completely out of options, it's the time when we lose that pride. You lose the thing that we think we're going to fix this and say, God, I cannot do this at all. I surrender everything to you. And it's a place, actually, God allows us to be in because it puts us where we truly learn to depend upon him. Now, God didn't create these circumstances that put Saul in this place. It's because of Saul's evil choices. The place you're in right now may be a desperation place. It may be not that God put you there, but that God has allowed you to be there. In this place, he says, lose that pride, fall on your knees, get some abandonment in your heart, humility, and depend upon God and seek his face, and he is there for you. We're at a place where God can show up and we can see him in a very clear way. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 6 says this, humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxiety upon him. If you just humble yourself, just say, God, I can't do this. I'm not going to do this. I need to depend upon you. You surrender it before him. There's sometimes when people are in desperate situations, they still won't surrender to God. And we need to do that. So we can feel the darkness all around us. I want you to just stop and we'll just understand, God, where are you at in this darkness? Just understand the darkness around us. We live in this broken world. It's broken by sin. It's broken by disease, age. It's broken by broken relationships, by people that's going to be there. So we're going to find ourselves in these times. And one of the things that Don said this week is when we're in desperation, it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of being in life. And we're in those times of desperation. I want you to look at the Bible and realize you're in really good company. There's all kinds of people through the Bible in desperation. There's Abraham and Moses and Elijah. There's Ezekiel and Jeremiah. There was Hannah, who was in desperation before God. Certainly here's David in desperation. In the New Testament, we see Paul in desperation, and we even see Jesus in desperation. When Jesus was in Gethsemane at the end of his life, after their Passover meal, they went out, and we see him desperate before God in prayer, imploring everything he had before him. Luke chapter 22, verse 44, it says, in anguish, Jesus prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. He was praying desperately before God. So we realize it's a part of our life, but there's some truths about God in times of desperation that I want us to remind ourselves of. One of the verses that we can look at of a man who was definitely in desperation was Job in the Old Testament. And Job said this in Job 34:21, God's eyes are on the ways of men. He sees their every step. There is no dark place, no deep shadow where evildoers can hide. There is no place so dark that God doesn't see me. God sees me. He sees the evildoers. He definitely sees you and me as well. No place so dark, no darkness, no despair, where God isn't there with you and sees where you're at. I like Psalms 56, and we see David being at a place where that desperation is on, but we see the truth that God sees me. We see in Psalms 56, he's writing in a place where it says the Philistines are after him, and he's in that first cave at Gath. The Philistines are coming after him, and so Psalms 56 is David's response in that time of desperation. Nicoma shared part of Psalms 56 last week. I want to read a little bit more from there. Verse 8, I like it from the ESV. It says this, to God, you have kept count of my tossings, put my fears in your bottle, and are they not in your book? It says God holds your tears. He not only sees you in your darkness, but he holds your tears. That's a term of endearment that God is there. He values the pain where you're at. Verse 9, the next verse of Psalms 56 says this, for this I know that God is for me. He doesn't just see us from a distance. He's holding your tears, but he is for me. God is for me. He's there with us. He's standing by us. He's coming alongside of us in a very real sense. So those times of desperations when maybe everybody else has abandoned you, when it's all falling apart, sometimes you're saying, God, where are you in this moment? Be assured of these truths in God's word. Even though you may not feel it, God is there. He sees you. He holds your tears, and he's for you. David was not alone in those caves, but God was with him. The next chapter in Psalms, or the next psalm is Psalms 57, and it tells us at the beginning that this psalm was written when he was in Gedi. So he's there in this cave of darkness when Saul's army is coming in after him, and how does he respond at this point? Verse 1 and 2, we can listen to his heartache, his pain is there. He says, have mercy on me, O God. Listen to the pain here. Have mercy on me, for in my soul takes refuge. I will take refuge in the shadow of your wings until the disaster is past. He's pleading before God, saying, God, would you please help me? Psalms 56, verse 1 and 2. Listen to the pleading here. Be merciful to me, O God, for men hotly pursue me. All day long they press their attacks. My slanderers pursue me all day long. Many are attacking me in their pride. He's saying they're coming after me. And God, where are you in this darkness that's around me? He's afraid. He's asking God for help. In verse 11, it says, in God I trust. I will not be afraid. It's not if I'm afraid, it's when I am afraid. Saying, God, where are you? Where's your presence? It's saying, I am going to trust God. So we know the truths that God sees you, God holds your tears, God is for you. Our response is to trust him. To choose, we're going to follow him. We're going to stand with him. In those times of desperation, we're going to say, God, I need your presence. So I want us to read those first two verses of Psalms 57. And again, David's response of desperation. And let's use the terms that he used and how we should turn to God. Would you read this with me? Have mercy on me, O God. Have mercy on me. For in you my soul takes refuge. I will take refuge in the shadow of your wings. Until the disaster is past, I cry out to God Most High. So in our desperation, we cry out and surrender to God. Say, God, I need you. And I surrender all. If we can't do it in times of desperation, then we're certainly not going to do it in times when everything's going well. It says, God, I'm going to trust you. And I cry out and I surrender everything to you. All my problems, all of my enemies, the oppression I'm in, I'm going to surrender it all to you. And look at verse number 7. Would you read this verse aloud with me and verse 9? My heart is steadfast, O God. My heart is steadfast. I will sing and make music. I will praise you, O Lord. Among the nations, I will sing of you among the peoples. We just got to commit that we're going to praise God. At times when things are going great, and at times when there's nothing else left but God, we praise him and we honor him and we're going to stand with him. God's truths are there. How we respond to him in those times of desperation is so important that we allow God to be the judge and God to be the one to work in our lives. So as we said before, times of desperation, all pride is gone. It's gone. There's nothing left. And it's a time when we fall on our knees in abandonment and humility and we seek God. That should be something that's not difficult to do in times of desperation. But again, sometimes we turn to ourselves. But you know, sometimes in desperation we are there, and some of you are there today, and I encourage you to do this. Maybe you're completely on your own because you haven't accepted Christ. But you don't have to be on your own. The Bible tells us when you receive Jesus, you receive his presence into your life, and forgiveness and grace and purpose and calling. So we're singing a little bit, you need to respond and accept that so you're not by yourself in desperation. Sometimes in desperation, we're on our knees and we're calling God, and then he lifts us up and things are going well, and we're doing fine, and honestly, our prayers change and they go a different route. Because things are well, we're just do a little flippant prayer, God, help me today, everything's fine, we just go on and no big deal until our next time of desperation. And last month, I was talking with our staff and with our elders, and our pastors said, you know, can we just remember those times of desperation, how we prayed? And can we pray like that all the time? Can we pray like that even when things are just going great? That during the day we say, God, I need you. God, I need you in my life. I need your direction. Help me make this decision. Help me do the right thing and prepare this way for me. And the same thing we do in desperation. Can we do that when things are just going well? And have this relationship with God where every day you're saying, God, I trust you. And every day I'm crying out in surrender. And every day I'm praising God because my whole life depends upon him and not on myself. If we could do that, our relationship with Christ would grow. And we'd know his presence all the time, in desperation or when things are well. God, I thank you for your word, the truth. Thank you for being there for us, that you hold our tears, that you see us, that you love us. And God, I pray that you help us, that we would respond to you in our times of desperation and even in times when things are going well. Help us to trust you. Help us to surrender to you. Father, help us to be a people that can praise you at all times. And Father, I pray that you would move amongst us, that you'd bring conviction, that you'd bring a refreshment in your grace. Father, that you move us to be a people of courage, that we would step up for you. I pray that you help a person today who receives you for the very first time. And God, you know our situations, where we're at. I pray that you would provide. And it's in Jesus I pray. Amen.
What's up, guys? Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to check out today's sermon. If you have any questions about anything that you've heard today, please feel free to contact us through the links below at harvesterchristian.org. We would love to hear from you. And if anything that you've heard today has really impacted your life and helped to reveal a clear picture of who Jesus is, make sure to share this video with your friends and family. Blast it on social media so more and more people can hear the message of Jesus Christ. And one last thing, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel so you can get notified as soon as we post new sermons. We love you guys. We believe in you. Have a great week. God bless.